Hello everyone, today I have a special deck for you. I took my favorite paper deck and I budgified it. Is budgified a word? Anyways, today we'll be taking a look at Tormod and Kamal Goglari Zombies. As always, you can find a link to the deck in the video description below, along with a link to my personal deck list. And if you can give this video a like, it really helps out the channel. And if you'd like to take your support even further, consider signing up to be a member for some great perks. Okay, with all the plugs out of the way, let's get into it. Let's kick things off with the commanders of the deck. First up is Tormod the Desecrator. This is a 4-mana 4/2 zombie wizard that has whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard, create a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token. And then we have Kamal, an 8-mana 5/5 human druid at the beginning of combat on your turn. Creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample until end of turn. And you can pay 1 and a green until end of turn. Target land you control becomes a 1/1 elemental creature with vigilance, indestructible, and haste, and it's still a land. The game plan for this deck is going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to want to take cards in and out of our graveyard in order to make tap zombies, and then once we have a large army, we cast Kamal to swing in for the game. Or we can use Altar of Dimension to mill people out because of how big our zombies get. Something to keep in mind is Tormod only makes one zombie no matter how many cards leave your graveyard. So even if you get your graveyard exiled, you will only get one zombie. And this is exactly where cards like Scavenging Ooze, the 2-mana 2/2 that we can pay a green to exile a card from a graveyard. If it's a creature, we can put a counter on Scooz and gain 1 life. Or Withered Wretch, it's a 2-mana 2/2 that we can pay 1, exile target card from a graveyard. We have Bloodsoaked Champion. This 1-mana 2/1 has raid for 1 and a black, which means if we attack with a creature, we can pay 1 and a black to return it from the graveyard to the battlefield. We also have Razorlash Transmogrant. This is a 2-mana 3/1 that has pay 4 black to return it from the graveyard to the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. This ability does cost 4 less to activate if an opponent controls 4 or more non-basic lands, which is basically all the time in Commander. There's also Skyclave Shade. This is a 2-mana 3/1 that has landfall. When a land enters the battlefield under your control, if Skyclave Shade is in your graveyard and it's your turn, you may cast it from the graveyard this turn. And then finally, we have Gravecrawler. This is a 1-mana 2/1 zombie that we can cast from our graveyard so long as we have another zombie creature, which we should because we make a lot of zombie tokens. And I almost forgot Reassembling Skeleton. This 2-mana 1/1 has 1 and a black, return it from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. What kind of Golgari graveyard deck would I be without including Dredge? For those of you who don't know, Dredge is a replacement to a draw effect where you mill that many cards and then return a card with Dredge from your graveyard to your hand. Cards like Golgari Thug is a 2-mana 1/1 with Dredge 4. We have Shambling Shell, which is a 3-mana 3/1 with Dredge 3. Stinkweed Imp, which is a 3-mana 1/2 flyer with Dredge 5. And Golgari Grave Troll, a 5-mana 0/0 with Dredge 6 that gets a +1/+1 counter for each creature card in your graveyard. We also have Dakmor Salvage. This is a land that has Dredge 2. It's great because some of our cards care about returning only lands to our hands. Of course, we're going to need a way to put all of these creatures into our graveyard. We have ways to sacrifice them with Carrion Feeder, Viscera Seer, and Woestrider. And Woestrider has the added benefit of being able to be escaped for 3 black and exiling 4 other cards from your graveyard. But the easiest way to fill up our graveyard is going to be self-mill. We have Stitcher Supplier, a 1-mana 1/1 that when ETBs or dies, you mill 3. We have Undead Butler, a 2-mana 1/2 that ETBs and mills 3. And then when it dies, we may exile it. When we do, we return target creature card from our graveyard to our hand. Circle of Land Druid. This is a 2-mana 1/1 that when an ETBs, you may mill 4 cards. And then when it dies, you can return target land card from your graveyard to your hand. This is great because it makes a zombie when it dies. We have Skull Prophet, which is a black and a green for a 3/1 that taps to add a black or a green, or we can tap it to put the top 2 cards of our library into our graveyard. Satyr Wayfinder is a 2-mana 1/1 that when an ETBs, we reveal the top 4 cards of our library. We may put a land card from among them into our hand and put the rest into the graveyard. Acolyte of Affliction is a 4-mana 2/3 when it enters the battlefield. You mill 2, and then you may return a permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. Again, this is great because we can get lands back and then we still get zombies. For non-creature mill, we have Grapple with the Past, which is a 2-mana instant where we mill 3 cards and return a creature or a land card from our graveyard to our hand. We have Grisly Salvage, a instant for Golgari, so a black and a green. We reveal the top 5 cards of our library. We may put a creature or a land from among them into our hand and put the rest into the graveyard. We don't get a zombie when this resolves, but we still get a mill ourselves. We also have Perpetual Timepiece. It's a 2-mana artifact that we can tap to put the top 2 cards of our library into our graveyard. And we can pay 2 mana to exile it and shuffle any number of target cards from our graveyard into our library. This This is great because it doubles up as graveyard protection. And then finally, we have Greater Good. We can sack a creature to draw cards equal to that creature's power, and then we discard 3 cards, which is an easy way to put creatures into the graveyard. We also have plenty of recursion in this deck. We have Eternal Witness, which will enter the battlefield and return a target card from our graveyard to our hand. Timeless Witness, which is essentially the same card for 1 more mana, but we can internalize it for 5 green. You won't do that too often, but it's nice to have it when you need it. We have Regrowth, which is 1 and a green, which is basically an Eternal Witness affected sorcery speed. We have Life and Death. So Death is a budget reanimate. It's 1 and a black, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. You lose life equal to its mana value. Dread Return, it's 2 black to return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And then it has Flashback to sacrifice 3 creatures. We have Diregraph Rebirth, which is a 5 mana sorcery that returns target creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield. However, it does cost 1 less to cast for each creature that died this turn. And usually we can get it down to just a black and a green. And it has Flashback for 5 green, but the cost reduction also applies to the Flashback cost. So normally we can spend 4 mana to reanimate 2 creatures. We even managed to include some removal that exiles cards from our graveyards, or just put cards into our graveyard to be exiled. Canker Bloom is a 2 mana 3/2 that we can pay 1, sack it, destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, or proliferate. We have Mass Vandal, a 2 mana 1/3 with Changeling, that when it ETBs, you may exile a creature card from our graveyard. If you do, exile target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. And we have Murderous Cut. This is a 5 mana instant that says destroy target creature, but it has Delve, so we can exile cards from our graveyard to pay for 1 of the generic. So essentially, this is a 1 mana destroy target creature card. Now, before we move on to the win conditions, I want to go over some of my favorite cards. We have Worm Harvest, a 5 mana sorcery that creates a 1/1 black and green worm creature token for each land in your graveyard. And it has Retrace, which means you may cast this card from your graveyard by discarding a land card in addition to paying its other costs. This works because when a card is cast from the graveyard, it technically leaves the graveyard and goes onto the stack. We have Cling to Dust, a 1 mana instant that exiles target card from a graveyard. If it's a creature card, we can gain 3 life. Otherwise, we draw a card. And it has Escape for 3 and a black and exile 5 other cards from our graveyard. So this is 1 mana card draw worst case, and best case, we get to do this over and over again to make zombies, draw cards, and gain life if we need to. And then finally, Mesmeric Orb. This is a 2 mana artifact that says whenever a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller mills a card. This is great in our deck because we want to fill our graveyard up, and because our zombies come into play tap. If we have this out, at the beginning of each of our untap step, we can mill like 15 cards. There's also Tyvar Jubilant Brawler. This 3 mana Planeswalker comes in with 3 loyalty. Activated abilities of creatures we control can be activated as though they had haste. We can pay 1 to untap up to 1 target creature, or we can -2 to mill 3 cards, and then we may return a creature card with mana value 2 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. This card is really good, especially with all the mana dorks that we're running. And last but not least is Spore Frog. This is a 1 mana 1/1 frog that we can sacrifice to prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. Spore Frog combos very nicely with Tortured Existence. It's a 1 mana black enchantment that we can pay 1 black, choose and discard a creature card, return target creature card from our graveyard to our hand. This, along with a Dredge creature, means we can get Spore Frog on every single one of our turns, even if we have to use it to save our lives. Okay, let's talk win conditions. The primary way we're going to win this game is by making a bunch of zombies, then casting Kamal to make them into 5/5s and swinging in for damage. This doesn't always work because the combo can be a little slow because our zombies come into play tapped and don't have haste. One of the first win conditions we have aside from just swinging in with our commander is Altar of Dementia. If we can make enough zombies, even if they are tapped, so long as we have Kamal out, we can still mill someone 50 or 60 cards with ease. We also have Desecrated Tomb. It's a 3 mana artifact that has whenever 1 or more creature cards leave our graveyard, we make a 1/1 bat creature token with flying. It's not as good as Tormod because it only cares about creatures, but it still gives us an army to swing in with, and 4/4 flying tramplers are still pretty good. We have the combo of Sir Conrad and Living Death, so long as Sir Conrad is on the board when we're resolving Living Death, because it'll see all of those creatures get exiled from our graveyard and drain our opponents out. We have the infamous Mirkwood Bats. This 4 mana 2/3 says whenever we create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. We're going to make so many zombies, and we have enough sack outlets that we can potentially win the game just with this card, and that's why it's such a great backup win condition. Now, if you're looking at this deck and you're like, oh, I love this idea, how can we make it better? Well, I got you. First off, you can check out my list also in the video description below for some ideas, but some key cards you should definitely pick up for upgrades would be Life from the Loam. This 2 mana sorcery lets us return 3 land cards from our graveyard to our hand. and then it has Dredge 3. So every turn we can cast it, maybe get some lands back, and then dredge it again. It's really good for making a lot of zombies in the same turn. There's the Gitrog monster, which will make us sacrifice a land at the beginning of our upkeep, but whenever a land is put into the graveyard from anywhere, including if we mill it, we get a draw card. And there's a really fun loop with Dakmor Salvage. I'm not going to explain how that loop works. You can check out some EDH primers if you want. It's very complicated. And then finally, Underrealm Lich. This is a 5-mana creature that when we would draw a card, instead we look at the top 3 cards of our library, put 1 into our hand and the rest into the graveyard. This is essentially a better Sylvan library because it's filling up our graveyard while giving us card selection. Let me know in the comment section below what your favorite commander deck is, and if I should make a budget version of it. If you want to see more deck techs like this, make sure to subscribe and ring that bell to get notifications when all my videos go up. Alrighty, see ya!